Oh, live in 40, T minus 40.
Here we are. Hey, everyone. Welcome to this live stream from Savvy and RumCask. My name's Will from Savvy. I'm super excited. This is the first live stream that RumCask is doing on the platform. Got a great guest today from William George Rum. So I'm going to turn it over to Indy from RumCask now, and enjoy, everyone.
Thanks so much, Will. Hey guys, thank you so much for joining us on our very first live broadcast with Savvy. I'm going to give you a quick little overview about us as RumCask. My name's Indy, by the way. I'm 1/3 of the family of the RumCask. Then I'm going to talk a little bit about our special guests that we have. And then from there, we're going to go deep dive straight into our topic, which is about how quality isn't a color and it's not an age when it comes to rum and actually all spirits in general. So a little bit about us as RumCask. So we started a few years ago. We went on a trip to St. Martin, and we bumped into a group of people who at the time were the International Rum Council. These guys were people like Sean Martin, Carl Grooms, Nick Ferris, Dave Russell. And we were having a conversation with them, and being rum lovers, but not really involved in the industry, we spoke to them and said, hey, you know, what's the best thing that you guys have ever done? And they were pretty quick to say that the government of Martinique had flown them to the island to sit and sample their rums and judge their rums. And quickly looked at each other and went, I want your job. That's absolutely what I'd love to do. So we came back to London on their advice and immersed ourselves in the rum world. We started writing and blogging and quickly realized that we're just not really good at writing in general. It's just not one of our strong suits. And the UK itself is full of really good rum bloggers and rum advocates, such as the Rum Diaries blog, Rum Pirate, Floating Rum Shack. There's just so many good bloggers and advocates out there. We needed to do something different if we wanted to actually impact the rum world. So we transitioned into running rum events instead and rum tastings with large venues such as large ships, private members clubs, and many, many others. Alongside them, we decided to evolve a bit and bring you live interviews with key people in the rum world, master distillers, master blenders, so you guys can really get on the ground floor with understanding who these people are and their motivations behind it. The final thing we need to mention about us as RumCask is as we innovate in these times, we have recently just put out tickets to the first ever European online rum tasting festival. So we're going to have 2 rooms with loads of different rums that we're going to send out to you. So please jump on our website and have a look, see if it's something that interests you. Our guest today is actually going to be presenting at that festival, which is going to be really, really cool. And talking of our guest, we have someone who's really truly well loved in the European bar scene. He is an international award-winning bartender. He is a European rum educator. I believe he won numerous international competitions. A judge for the top 50 best bars in the world. And now, amazingly, you're the co-owner and co-founder of William George Rum. We have Andrew Nicholls from Amsterdam. Andrew, how you doing?
Well, thank you very much, Indy. I'm doing good, thanks. Very good. You know, that intro put a smile on my dial. I'm, you know, feeling top of the world now.
Well, it's all true. I didn't make up anything. Checks in the post later. So,
no, thank you.
Oh, my pleasure, my pleasure. A quick heads up to the guys in the chat. Firstly, thank you so much for joining us. We've got a lot of people from the US, from Europe, from Canada. Really, really cool to have you guys here. Please share the event with your friends, and let's get some more people in to hear Andrew talk on an amazing topic. So, Andrew, let's dive straight in. So, how quality isn't a color and it isn't an age. How did you come across that topic? Why is that topic important to you?
So at first, like as a bartender, it's something which, to be honest with you, I didn't actually pay that much attention to, because I always just saw when somebody coming into the bar saying, I want this style of spirit, I just saw that as their preference. I didn't actually realize that so many people associated color of spirit with quality, because again, as a bartender, I was tasting some phenomenal Peruvian piscos. Those are completely unaged. I was tasting all sorts of different products. On a trip to Kentucky, I got to try a White Dog off the still, and that's unaged bourbon, and it's phenomenal. So there was all these things that, you know, I figured were just drink preferences, and didn't realize that a lot of people made this association between a color of a spirit or the age of a spirit and the quality of a spirit. So when it came to putting my own rum, William George, together, so many people said to me, like, how old is your rum? And I would say, well, hang on, it's an unaged rum. Well, partly unaged rum. We do have one aged blend, a bit of the blend in there, but I'll get to that later. But it's a white rum. We're not focusing on age. It's a white spirit. Mm-hmm. So they'd say to me, well, you must be crazy, because everyone knows that dark rum is better quality. And straight away, this kind of tidal wave hit me, where there is a huge amount of bullshit out there. So there is no real correlation between the color of a spirit and the quality of that spirit. And over the course of this, you know, kind of little chat, I just want to get into that. And of course, you know, whoever's watching here, thank you, first of all, for tuning in. Really, really appreciate it. But if you've got any questions along the way, I'm South African. I'm very laid back. If I was any more laid back, I'd be horizontal. So just fire in those questions. Feel free to pipe in whenever you like. But I really kind of, as I said, got thrown back by this constant kind of thing where people were saying to me, like, why aren't you doing a dark spirit? And when you look at what aging does to a spirit, okay, so the goal of aging is to remove harsh flavors from raw alcohol, essentially, okay, and then to impart this tasting or this wood characteristic tasting to the product as well. Okay, so those are, let's break those down into those two things.
Sure.
If the goal is to remove harsh characteristics from a white spirit, it means that those harsh characteristics were there in the first place. Okay, so let's look at white spirits as a whole right now. The most consumed white spirit in the world is vodka. How many times do you hear people saying, like, oh, you know, like, you should age this because it's harsh and it's crap? People drink vodka because they think it's very smooth. Okay, look, it's the most neutral spirit there is. So they're drinking it because it's smooth. There's no real aging. There's a few vodkas that try to age their product. And look, you know, fair play to them. If they want to do that, cool. But as we'll talk about a bit later, there is no real point in aging a spirit like vodka, because it simply doesn't have the backbone, the flavor development in order to withhold that aging in a barrel. So if people have this whole correlation between, you know, quality and spirit, or quality and color, sorry, then why aren't they calling for vodkas to be aged? Why aren't they calling for gins to be aged? Why aren't they calling for Peruvian piscos to be aged? Why aren't they? There are all these wonderful spirits out there that are completely unaged, and yet suddenly when it comes to a rum, they suddenly go, oh, it's better if it's aged. So there's, as I said it right in the beginning, there's a lot of bullshit. Unfortunately, you know, we live in a world where marketing tends to dictate the spending habits of consumers. So if we look at this whole thing of, you know, aging is better, I think a lot of that has come from people have drawn this association between the color of a spirit and the quality of that spirit, but then also the number on the bottle. Okay, so if we look at the number on the bottle, that 12, that 10, whether it's a 23, a 30-year-old, whatever it might be, like, everyone thinks that the older it gets, the better the quality, and that simply isn't true. I've got a friend in the whiskey industry who I won't mention right here because I haven't actually asked his permission, but a friend of mine in the whiskey industry who's a big name in the whiskey industry, and he gets sent incredible bottles of whiskey all the time. And I asked him a while ago, like, you must have some pretty special whiskeys in there, and, you know, all these things that everyone hunts for, these 30, 35, 40, 50-year-old whiskeys. And he said, yeah, I've got a few of them. He goes, most of them are quite crap, actually, because the backbone of the spirit has been completely dominated by the characteristics of the wood. So if you're a spirits drinker and you love that characteristic of the raw spirits. It's like me, when it comes to tequila, I'm a Blanco tequila nut. Okay,
Yeah.
like I love the flavor of that agave note that's going to come through. Guess what? The funny thing is with aging is that the longer you sit something on wood for, the more it tastes like wood.
Yes.
Right? So exactly. You know, there's that whole thing that you might see people do from time to time where you take, say, 5 cups of tea. Okay, like really boiling water, 5 cups, that's all you got in there. Now you take 1 tea bag and you put that tea bag in cup number 1 for 2 minutes, cup number 2 for 2 minutes, cup number 3 for 3 minutes, etc., etc. Look at that tea. Look at the color and also taste cup number 1. Then look at the color and taste cup number 5. Cup number 5 has got almost no color and almost no flavor to it. Okay, and barrels are essentially the same. A brand new barrel is going to give you that big, intense kind of reaction. Whereas a much older barrel or a used barrel is going to give you less and less depending on how old or how used that barrel is. So when people talk about something that's, say, 12 years old, what does that mean? Right? Like, does it mean it's 12 years in a brand new barrel? Does it mean that it's spent a couple years in a brand new barrel and then the rest of the time in a 100-year-old barrel, in which case there's almost no interaction? So there's a huge amount of kind of misleading, I think, that happens with that. And what, by the end of this chat, what I'd love to get, you know, anybody to realize is that there is no correlation between the color of a spirit or the age of a spirit and the quality that's in the bottle.
Yeah, I think that's a fair point. Absolutely.
So shall I just carry on rambling here? All right. You know, I'm getting into the right hearing.
Should we talk about what the influencing factors are around aging?
Yes, absolutely. So first of all, let's look at what these barrels are. Tell you what, Will, if you wouldn't mind switching over to that slide I have on the cask sizes, that's great. Thanks. Could you expand that for us a second?
We can bring down a little bit.
There we go. Perfect. All right. Thanks. So if we have a look at that, you can see here different sizes of casks. Okay. So one of the things you'll see there is a barrel, and particularly American Standard barrel, because there were also British barrels as well. So the American Standard barrel is a 200-liter barrel, okay, or a cask, sorry. So a barrel, when we talk about it, a barrel is a size of cask, and all these other measurements on that list over there are all sizes of casks as well. So certainly when we talk about something being aged, I think first of all we can pretty much assume that most of what we're going to be aging is going to be aged on oak. Okay, so the first question then is, what kind of oak is it? Is this American oak or is this French Limousin oak? Okay, Limousin oak has a totally different grain structure to American oak. So we're getting a very different flavor profile coming out there. American oak, very high in the chemical vanillin. So that's where we're getting a big whack of that kind of vanilla profile coming through. But again, a new oak American barrel is going to pump that vanillin flavor into our distillate in it, all right? So whereas a much older one is going to pump less of it into our distillate. So also, the size of the barrel, or cask, sorry, I'm doing it myself now. The size of the cask is extremely significant as well, because a smaller cask is going to give us far more interaction between the wood itself and the spirit inside the cask. Okay, so if we look over there, we've got a blood tub, which is 40 liters. And I was saying to Indy earlier, my mission from now on is just to age something in a blood tub, just to say it's blood tub age. But we look at that 40-liter cask over there, blood tub, and we've got at the bottom 1,000-liter ton. If you were to put a spirit in a 40-liter cask for 5 years and a spirit in 1,000-liter cask for 5 years, the two products at the end of it would be completely different. All right? Absolutely. That massive interaction between the small cask and the spirit is going to produce something which after 5 years would probably be quite horrible to drink. All right? So with that, you're probably looking at literally a month or a couple months is what you're going to be looking, if you want that balance between the backbone of the spirit and the characteristics that you're going to get through the cask itself. Whereas on that 1,000-liter ton, hell, you can leave stuff in there for ages. Okay, because again, it's a much slower interaction between the two of them. So straight away, as I mentioned, we've got our type of wood there. Okay, so let's assume that we're using oak, but you could be using, if we look in Brazil, okay, they're using some incredible indigenous woods now for aging as well. So again, totally different kind of interaction with those woods than what you're going to get from oak. Okay, so again, what does an age statement mean there? But back to oak. We got that. Is it American oak? Is it French oak? Is it Slovenian oak? Like where is this oak coming from? What's the grain structure like in it? Then is this, what size cask are we talking? Okay, if we're talking a small cask, then 12 years in that is completely different to 12 years in a drum or a port pipe or a sherry butt. So we're looking at that size of cask. Now, how old is this cask? Is this cask new? Is it something that's been used just for kind of one batch of American bourbon for God knows how long? Sometimes in bourbon, it could be something which has had bourbon in it for just 2 years. Okay, like most of them will go up to probably around 6 years before they stop aging. But let's say you've got a cask which has been used for 2 years. Or again, if we've got a cask that's been used for 15 years. So how old is this cask? What was in this cask beforehand? So you can see here with this picture where we're painting. Oh, and also like what influence has temperature had? Have these casks been sitting in warehouses where the temperature gets up to 50 degrees Celsius? Or have they been sitting in Scotland where they've been sitting in 12 degrees Celsius? Or have they been in a controlled climate where it sits at a constant temperature per year? Have they been in an open warehouse like you can find in a lot of rums where you've got this breeze blowing through, but it means that the temperature fluctuates all the time and it's affected by temperatures day and night? So looking at this and just thinking, is this, if a product says it's 12 years old or 30 years old or whatever, in order for that to mean anything, we actually have to know what all of those factors are. And then at the end of that, none of that matters if what's been put into this barrel overpowers the distillate. The whole point of this is that the aging process that we look at this, the aging process doesn't define the quality of the product. What's going to define the quality of the product is the distillate that goes into that cask in the first place. Okay, so if you have a great quality distillate, then that's going to come, as long as you don't overage it, you're going to have a great product at the end of it. If you have a crap distillate and you chuck that in some casks, all the magic casks like those casks could be coated with unicorn tears. It's not gonna make it any better. It's still going to be crap distillate at the end of it. So, in which case, there's various other techniques that people use to hide that. But I think it's really important to understand that the quality aspect of it is what happens, once we have those master distillers and they focusing on that fermentation and on that distillation and what comes out at the end of that distillation, that's the quality. That's, what happens after that is essentially, it's a bit like what a bartender does. You're going to add a bit of this and a bit of that to highlight certain characteristics of that base distillate. And when you're aging, you're doing the same thing. You're going to take a product where, let's say you've got a nice, big, funky Jamaican rum, okay, or something nice and big from Guyana or wherever it may be. That is going to have a backbone which can withstand an aging process, okay? It's going to have that flavor backbone where you can put that on a cask for a long period of time. And again, when I say a long period of time, this again depends. Is this a new cask? Is this a really old cask? Is this what's been in the cask, etc.? So you could have, like I've seen a bottling from a 14-year-old Kintra, okay, from Jamaica, where 14 years old, and it honestly looked the same color as some of the 3-year-old rums that I've tried as well. Okay, so I'm sorry I don't have any here with me. It was quite delicious, so it disappeared quite quickly. But the fact is, if somebody is of the opinion that the color of that rum is going to determine the quality of that rum, then by that logic, you would think that the color of this rum isn't that good. I mean, the quality of this rum isn't that good because it's a light color. They're probably going to assume it hasn't been aged that long. But it has. It's been aged 14 years. Judging by the color of that rum, we can probably gauge that it was, you know, perhaps in older casks, in lightly toasted casks, and in all these things that are going to release slow, kind of gradually introduce different wood flavor profiles into the spirit. So is this making sense so far, by the way? Am I just like going on one of my tangents? And
I'm definitely understanding it. I'm not sure the chat haven't asked any questions so far, so I'm not sure if you're perfectly or they're not even understanding your amazing accent. One of the two.
Making me blush, Indy. So another thing, of course, that's going to have an influencing factor, of course, is altitude. Okay, so what is the altitude that we're aging this product at? And if it's sea level, then that's of course going to have a totally different influencing factor to something which is much higher at altitude. So higher altitude means thinner air. It means cooler conditions. Maybe even sometimes a bit more rain, etc. So these are all damper conditions. They're going to allow for conditions where you can perhaps age a little bit longer without the cask overpowering the base distillate that's in there. So I think focusing on what you have in a bottle, for me, it's just so much more important to look at a flavor profile, look at where a particular rum has come from, focus on that, and then focus on how aging can be a part of that process. Okay, so we're not looking, I think to me personally, it's just complete and utter bollocks when I see somebody say, oh, I've got this amazing whatever age statement rum. Like, cool. I've tried some rums that are 18 years old and they were completely out of balance. Yeah. Okay, so I would much rather have an unaged rum, which is you know, balanced and delicious, and everything I'm looking for is the essence of that cane and a true expression of the region that it's from, than have something which has an age statement on it, but is just really killed by all the characteristics that come in the rum. So that's when I was developing my own rum, William George, that's very much the kind of thinking that I had in mind. I wanted something that was going to hit all three parts of the palate. Okay, so for me, so there's 6 rums in the blend. One of those rums is a blend of 3 to 5 year olds, which is then carbon filtered to remove color. And the whole purpose behind that was using that flavor profile as part of a means of balancing out the palate on the rum. Okay, so at the back of the palate, you'd get this vanilla, cacao, raisin note. I find for me personally, like there's some rums, especially because mine's at 43 ABV, 43% ABV. So at 43% ABV, like although it's big and punchy and funky, you can lose it a bit at the back of the palate. So I've got a lot of those beautiful, bright Jamaican notes that come through. Okay, so I wanted to maintain those beautiful, bright Jamaican notes that come through on the front of the palate. If I had taken that and put it in a cask and let it sit there for a period of years, as much as I love aged Jamaican rums, they lose a lot of that bright funkiness that comes through. They're still funky because they're from Jamaica, all right? Like Jamaican rums are funky, end of story. But there is that bright kind of fruity pop that they tend to lose as part of the aging process. So again, if you are somebody who is looking for that nice, bright, fruity funkiness to come through, then it doesn't really make sense to look at an age statement because you're going to lose that bright, fruity funkiness. Okay? And now, I'm not saying that aged rums are worse quality than white rums, okay, or dark rums, let's say, are worse quality, because they're not. I'm just saying that this whole thing of putting spirits on cask is part of a process of developing a flavor profile, one which if done correctly, is, and I'm trying to choose my words carefully here, one which, if done correctly, creates a beautiful rounded product. But if done a little bit too long, it doesn't create a beautiful rounded product. It creates a product which has now just been overpowered by wood. And the unfortunate thing is that people will still pay huge amounts of money for that because they see a color, they see an age statement, and therefore they believe that this is what quality is meant to be. And it's not. Like having something, the longer you put any spirit, if we were to, and I'll try to get this right with my camera, hang on. If we were to take all the spirits, okay, and we put them on this big kind of like pile like this, and we put all the spirits in casks.
Yep.
And we age and we age and we age. The longer we age them for, and I'm gonna have to hurry the wait, there we go. The longer we age them for, the more they're gonna taste like a cask.
Yes.
Okay, so in theory, after a certain period of time, you probably wouldn't be able to tell the difference between anything that you have in cask because it's all just gonna taste like cask. Does that make sense?
Yes, yeah, absolutely makes sense. I mean, you were talking a little bit earlier about your blend in William George, and you mentioned that the reason you want to age a product or have an aged part of your product is to hit a certain part of your palate when you drink it. Where do you think that aged part hits? Maybe if you could use your rum or other rums in general, where do you think that part of the palate, what flavor profile comes from that? Because you mentioned vanilla earlier, if you're using quite new American oak barrels, because they're quite high in vanilla, as you mentioned. So you're going to get some of those vanilla notes. But what other notes do you think come from a barrel? So if people listening at the moment are going to try a spirit and they might be able to pick out those flavors, then they might be able to understand and go, okay, I'm tasting that flavor and it's been aged for 12 years. That's because of the barrel. So maybe we can help explain that to our viewers.
Yeah, so again, that's going to come down to what was in that barrel. So if this is an ex-bourbon barrel, then obviously vanilla is a big part of that, okay? So it's the same thing when you nose bourbons. You definitely pick up that vanilla-y note that pops through. At the same time, I always get like a nice nuttiness that comes through in bourbons as well. Hey, you get nuttiness in rums. But now if we're taking these same products and we're putting them in, say, Madeira casks, or we're putting them in ex-Pedro Jimenez sherry casks, or we're putting them in port casks, or whatever they might be, you're then going to get a completely different flavor profile coming through in that. So like Pedro Jimenez casks, they're massive on these kind of, like dried fig and raisins, and sometimes these chocolatey notes that come through as well. So that's, if you're looking at Sauterne casks, then of course you're going to start getting these almost like tropical, fruity, like lychee, pineapple-y type notes that come through. If we're looking at port casks, then again, that deep raisin, plummy kind of, all these different things. Now let's look at Fino sherry casks. You're going to get these walnut kind of notes that come through. Okay, so, and then with Oloroso sherry casks, you're going to get, again, I tend to get like candied orange zest that comes through with Oloroso sherry, but then also like nuttiness as well. Sometimes Brazil nuts, and with some bourbon casks, I can get this macadamia nut that comes through too. It's not quite coconut, it's not as tropically as coconuts, but it's definitely nutty in that kind of vicinity. And so I associate it always with macadamia nut. And that's something that we have in William George. There's this macadamia nut note that kind of hits me on the mid palate there as we start to go into this vanilla cacao raisin note that comes in the back of the palate. And again, that's typical of the casks that we have there. And they all the rums that we have that are well, the rum that's aged in our blend is ex-bourbon cask. So there is that big vanilla whack that comes through at the back.
Yeah, absolutely. I think a lot of what you're talking about is just helping our viewers understand more about what they're drinking. And also it's to kind of break a lot of what we've been coached into believing is quality by a lot of the media and a lot of marketing, as you mentioned. I know in the UK, a lot of people grow up and drink the most popular rum in the world, which is Bacardi White, Carta Blanca. and they'll drink it when they're young, when they're legal potentially, or not, and drinking when they're a little bit earlier than 18. And what happens is they'll have bad experiences on that spirit. And rather than going, I've had a bad experience on Bacardi, they'll say, I've had a bad experience on rum and white rum. And as a result, they will either never drink white rum again, or they'll never drink rum again. And I think it's very difficult for people, especially in the UK, Europe, and I think in the US as well, from the people that I've spoken to, they all kind of said the same thing, where they go, yeah, that's absolutely what's happened. And now until we go and we're a little bit older and we give the spirit another chance and understand more about it, we're just never going to be able to get to grips like this. But I think stuff like this, where you can understand all of these different influencing factors, you know, you talked about the cask, you talked about the wood size, you talked about the type of wood, you talked about the cask sizes, you talked about what was with its previous use, you talked about the type of oak, you know, where was the oak from, you talked about temperature, you talked about altitude, the distillate that goes into it. Let's talk a little bit about color. Again, where you mentioned a little bit about color, but so there's a lot of rums on the market which are unaged but have some color in them. How does that happen?
Yeah, so one of the things you're allowed to do is what's called color consistency, and I think quite a few brands kind of play around with that consistency a bit too much, you know, like it goes beyond consistency. But of course, you're allowed to add something called E150A as a color consistency agent. E150A is essentially a burnt sugar. It gets referred to a lot as caramel. I think caramel is quite misleading because, you know, culturally we associate caramel with sweet. And E150A, a burnt sugar, basically all the residual sugars are burnt out of it. So it's not something that's sweet. It's something which is very concentrated burnt sugar color. And you can put a gram of that in a liter and it will, you know, it'll completely change the color of whatever spirit you add it to. To give you an idea, I mean, there are some red vermouths which are made with white wine and then colored with E150A as well. So if you, so I mean, nobody ever picks up, you know, their red vermouth and goes, oh, this smells like caramel. Look, if you're picking up Carpano Antica Formula, you will smell vanilla, but that's because they use vanilla in their botanical mix. But if you think about vermouths, nobody picks it up and goes, oh, this smells like caramel. It's not a caramel in the sense of what you're going to put on your pancakes or anything like that. It is literally a burnt sugar. So that can be used and is used by most brands for color consistency.
Yeah, I know. I've been to a distillery and I got to try actually the caramel coloring. And as soon as I tried it, I actually realized, oh, that product's got caramel coloring, that product's got caramel, because it's such a distinctive flavor profile that the moment you use too much of it, again, it's like, as you were mentioning with over oaking a product and then all you taste is the barrel. In the same way, if you use too much of that E150A, you do get to a stage where all you can taste is that product and it's not a nice taste.
No, exactly. And, you know, I think it's again, you know, this whole misconception that people have where they look at something that's a darker color and they go, oh, that's quality. It's like, no, it could just be a shit ton of E150A. So it's a conversation I have with actually friends of mine all the time. You know, like a few of my friends over here I live in Amsterdam. A few of my friends here in Amsterdam are starting to get into rum. And of course, that's super exciting for me because the more people that share the rum love, the better. You know, like for me, it's not just about my brand, it's about the category. And I want people drinking rum in general. But they'll pick up something from a shop and they'll go, I bought this. It's dark, so I'm guessing it's quite good. And like, that's literally comments that I get, you know, like they'll refer to the color and they'll say, oh, so it must be pretty good. And I don't want to start bashing anybody on this. That's not the point of it. But it's brands where it's basically heavily colored, heavily sweetened. There's no identifying factors from the base spirit as such. You would, it really, if you taste it, you wouldn't go like, oh, it's a rum from here. The only reason why you identify it is because it's one of those rums, which is just heavily sweetened, heavily colored, and the quality statement essentially becomes the color and sweetening, rather than the quality statement being the base distillate. And here's the thing that I'm trying to get at is if you have a white rum, you can't do that shit with it. Okay, like you can't pull the wool over people's eyes that way. Okay, so you can't say, like, you know, there is no like color association, there is no age statement you're using, there is none of that stuff. Like it's a white spirit that you have in a bottle and it speaks for itself. And I would love it if most people, the way I always, again, when, you know, years ago when I was on the bar trying to convince people to try Blanco tequila, you know, when most people had only tried mixed or tequila, and you get into this world of 100% agave tequila and it's magical, and trying to get people to taste that. And I'd always start them off with Blanco tequila and just say, look, here's the base of it. Now, here's what this much aging does to it. Here's what that much aging does to it. Which do you prefer? And majority of people would prefer the Blanco tequila. And this is something I think I wish would happen with rum more, especially when it comes to educating people on regions of rum. Okay, so if we look, you know, like the most common classifications that people refer to with rum is white, gold, dark, right?
Yeah.
So, which means absolutely nothing. We would never say that about whiskey. You know, we would never say that an Islay is the same as a bourbon because they're the same color, right? Like it's ridiculous.
Mm-hmm.
So with that in mind, like I would love it if people learnt about the regions of rum, starting with the unaged rums, starting with the white rums, you know, where you get to taste, as I said, that essence of where it's produced, how it's produced, the type of fermentation that's happening. Is this long fermentation? Is it short fermentation? Is this pot distilled? Is it, you know, like single column distilled? Is it Kofi still? Is it multi-column? Is it, you can tell all of this really simply by tasting the white expressions from different regions. And it's a great way to then kind of get into the age characteristics where you can say, okay, so now this product they're saying is 5 years old. This one they're saying is 10. This one they're saying is 12 or whatever. Taste them as you go and you go, you know what? I've lost some of that big, bright, lovely kind of fruitiness that I got in the white expression. I want that. So this 12-year-old is too old for what I'm looking for in this product. Okay, like maybe the 5-year-old, you can go like, oh, I still got a bit of it there, you know, but it's, you always looking, I wish people would start here. Start at, you know, the genesis as such, and then move your way into it and explore it from there. And I think a lot of people would change their minds very quickly as to what they see as quality in a bottle. You know,
that's a great way to go forward, Andrew, actually. I know as you were mentioning, tequila and agave in general, they normally only age their products for a maximum of 18 months to 2 years, because otherwise they've always felt it becomes over oaked, you lose the flavor of the base spirit, and then therefore what's the point in drinking our product? And I think that's really very cool. And I think it is actually a little bit done a little bit more with French style rum, your agricoles and your cane juice rums, where a lot of people who drink those spirits actually do prefer the unaged expressions, because that's where you're getting most of the flavor. And then you've got to kind of work your way through and go, you know what, at this point in the aging process, as you mentioned, you know, that then becomes too oaky for me and I lose those flavors that I really liked as unaged. And I think that'd be really cool to, I think it'd be really cool for you to explore from the start, from the unaged. Ideally go to the distillery if you're able to, or if you can't, pick up a bottle of what is their youngest aged or unaged, and, you know, try that and kind of understand what they think a rum should taste like in its absolute rawest base form. I mean, that's a really cool idea.
For sure. And, you know, like I said earlier, I really want, you know, the category of rum to grow. And because in my opinion, it is the most magical spirit category there is. It is the most diverse spirit category. And if somebody wants to challenge me on that, that's cool. I'll take it. But it's, it is the most diverse spirit category there is, and we need people to explore it. And I would love to start seeing even things like, most of the time a brand will have a brand ambassador and the industry will approach that brand ambassador for information on a product. I would love it if consumers started reaching out to brand ambassadors. I encourage people wherever I live, and anybody who's tried my rum, I encourage them to get hold of me all the time and fire questions at me. Ask me the difficult questions. Ask me the stuff that, you think I might be talking shit on or whatever. And people do try to do it, but I don't, because I love my product, and I do need my product to sell because it's how I make my living. But at the same time, I genuinely want the category of rum to grow. And I think if anybody's out there, if you're a consumer watching this, so you're not part of the drinks industry, but you love your rum or you just love spirits in general, reach out to these people and just say, listen, what's the story here? If they're not willing to get back to you, if they're not willing to tell you things, then there's probably a reason for that. Okay, anybody who's got nothing to hide will speak openly. So it's not Coca-Cola. You can't steal the recipe. Okay, you can't steal the recipe. So even if they tell you 100% of what they do, because of where they do it, how they do it, the yeast strains they have, all the rest of it, it is literally impossible for you to replicate this product exactly. You might do something which is similar, but you won't replicate their product. So spirit producers, if they've got nothing to hide, they will speak openly. So I'd encourage everybody out there, get out there, contact people. If you've got questions, ask them. And if they don't get back to you, well, there's probably a reason.
I think that is an absolute perfect segue for us to drop into the few questions that we have. And I think that's a great way to push forward. So in our question box, we've got Samantha, and we're being asked, what brands or companies do you think are doing a good job of presenting younger or the unaged spirits as high quality?
Okay, great. So I think there's quite a few that are doing it. And I just want to say, first of all, that how are we going to define quality? Okay, so it's like, and I know there's a few people who are going to look at me funny when I say this, but I don't consider Bacardi a poorly distilled product.
Agreed.
All right, it's not. It's a multi-column product. It's very, very difficult to screw up multi-column distillation. In fact, it's quite impressive if you manage to screw up multi-column distillation. So it's a multi-distilled product. It's not a bad distillate. It's just an extremely light distillate. And if you're a vodka drinker, that might be what you levitate towards. Okay, so, but if you're not, like for me personally, I don't think it's a bad product, but it's not an interesting product to me because I like that funkiness that comes through. So my personal take on things is when I look at brands that are really doing a good job of trying to get people to understand the unaged category or the white rum category as a whole, I'd like to think that we're having a small dent in things. And look, we are a tiny brand, but I do work my ass off at trying to get people to understand this. I think the guys, if you're looking for bigger, bolder expressions at higher ABV, I think the guys at Villiers are doing a fantastic job. I think if you're looking for something in between there, then I think if you look at the guys from Real McCoy, from what's produced at Foursquare in Barbados, I think they're doing a great job as well. And a lot of the rums, like if you look at the Dourlies range, they're 3-year-old. There's a lot of runs that are coming out of there. Now we go to Jamaica and we start to look at, Worthy Park. And I mean, I think what Worthy Park has is fantastic rum as well, because I love, again, that big funky style. Moved to Haiti and we got the Clarens. Again, I mean, who doesn't love Claren? We got a reunion, Savannah. Oh, love Savannah. So in terms of who's doing a great job, I think we need to approach this slightly differently. There's a huge number of distilleries that are doing a great job. What we need that in combination with like what you guys are doing at RumCask. which is getting the word out there. Okay, so we need that combination of people spreading the word and the producers that are producing this beautiful product as well. A lot of the rum distilleries, they have minuscule budgets. And I mean, I don't own a distillery. I just blend rums together. I've got a minuscule budget. I mean, like, geez, I've got a budget on a shoestring. So it's very difficult for us to be able to get the word out there on mass scale. But if there is a RumCask, and if there is a floating rum shack or a fat rum pirate, or all these guys who put word out there, that's incredibly important. And for anybody watching this, like if you're passionate about rum and you've got mates who you're gonna do a bit of a rum tasting with, or you've been invited around to a barbecue in South Africa, we would call it braai. If ever you go to South Africa, make sure you have a braai. But if you're going around to somebody's house or having people coming around to your place, like, give them a taste, like, educate them as well, and just have that share in spreading the love of the rum world, because there is so much love to spread.
I think, yeah, you're absolutely bang on there. A lot of really good distilleries, when you actually spend a little time in the rum world, really do care about what they start with and what their base product is. For me, the only thing I would really add on to you is, in general, I think that's done, as I mentioned earlier, with stuff that's cane juice. So from Haiti, from Guadeloupe, Martinique.
I didn't even mention agricoles. Yeah, I mean, like, Martinique and Guadeloupe, Marie Galante, like, the stuff that's coming out of there, which is, the white expressions as well. I mean, delicious rums.
Absolutely. So there's a lot of them, Samantha, is what we like to say. If you could just have a little look around. I think most distilleries, when they start putting out their products, look for their unaged range and see what you think there. Another question we've got, Rum to the World, asking, does your future of William George include distribution into the USA?
Oh, look, we would love to be in the USA. Absolutely. I mean, it's something that we haven't been able to get around to yet, but it's something that we definitely want to get into as soon as we can, essentially. Yeah, I mean, obviously it's a bit of a challenge right now, because hopping on planes and things is a bit of an issue. But I mean, if anybody's out there and wants to have that conversation, then please do reach out. We'd love to be in the US.
Yeah, I think we were lucky enough as RumCask. We were at the Miami Rum Festival earlier on this year, and we actually got to showcase William George at one of our rum events that we managed to put
beautiful.
on. And the reception we got was really, really impressed. So yeah, I think there is definitely a market out there. So fingers crossed, Rums of the World, that it happens soon.
Yeah, fingers crossed.
We've got Mike Streeter. Mike Streeter, how are you, sir? He is asking, what do you think of the Solera process? Do you think it's legit, or do you think it's a scam?
So I think there's two different things to discuss here. Is the Solera process legit? Absolutely. It's a wonderful process. It can produce some stunning rums, etc. Well, it's part of a process that produces stunning rums. Is an age statement legit? Like, nah. Like, I've had a few Solera producers try to, convince me, and for me personally, if you're producing rums Solera, like, even if you put average age means nothing in a Solera process, in my opinion. That's a mean. If you want to look at, I think the closest you could even look at is a median age. But even as a median, at least then you've thrown your outliers out, and it's not an average. But I personally don't like seeing age statements or numbers, misleading numbers on Solera aged bottles. I don't think it does anything for the industry. And to be honest with you, apart from being a marketing gimmick, I don't see what it does for the product either. Like, it's all you're doing is misleading people. So in terms of, is it a cool process? Yeah, I've tasted some stunning Solera rums.
Can you very quickly just explain to anyone who might not know very quickly what a Solera process is?
Okay, so it's actually bloody technical there. It really is a technical process, but I think the easiest way to describe it right now, let me see if I can draw something over here. So just give me a 2 second. I'm whipping out my inner Bob Ross. Okay. And I've kind of run out of space over here. But if we look here, okay, so let's imagine each of these is a cask. Okay, and we're gonna fill up this top cask over here. All right. Once that's full, we're gonna empty that into these 2 casks. Okay. Once those casks start to fill up, we're gonna empty them into these casks like that. Okay. So this whole time, essentially what you're doing is you're just taking product and you're layering it down these different casks. And you don't have to have the same casks there the whole time. It's like you could have some cognac casks in there. You could have some, Oloroso sherry, PX sherry, Madeira, some brandy casks, whatever it might be. But you're essentially just layering down in this aging process. What that means then is that when you come to tapping out that product at the end, you probably have a pretty consistent product, in all fairness. Like it's one way of developing consistency. And very often you have a delicious tasting product. But as you can imagine, you'll have some rums in there which might be, and I was very close to mentioning a number there, which would be very directed at a particular brand. But let's say you have a rum in there which is 30 years old. There might be a drop of that 30-year-old rum in every bottle, but that's the statement that'll get put on the label. That number 30 will get put on the label, and that to me is bullshit. I don't like seeing that. Does that mean that the product inside the bottle is a bad product? It's like, no. There are some genuinely good Solera rums out there, but they are misleading in how they try to market the product. So it's the marketing that's wrong with Solera more than anything.
I think that's a fair comment. So essentially, Solera good, aging bad. Age statement's bad, basically.
Yeah, okay. The marketing bad, Solera's good. Yeah.
So good. Yeah. I think that's fair. Hope that answers your question, Mike. We've got Radek with another question. And guys, if you have any other questions, please chuck them in, and we can get Andrew to answer them for you. Thanks, Mike. Radek, what brands do you think are misleading their customers about rum age statements? Literally exactly what we try to avoid. Radek's asking about.
Radek.
I think here, the best way to
I'm gonna do this as diplomatically as I can.
Please.
Any Solera aged rum with an age statement, in my opinion, is misleading people. I don't want to get into brands because I'm not here to brand bash. But I will say, in my opinion, and I'm pretty sure everyone's got at least one product in their mind at the moment. But any Solera age product with an age statement, in my opinion, is misleading. And I'm going to go as far to say with a number on the bottle, because I think there's a couple brands out there. If you go back and look at previous bottles, go back 10, 15 years, they would have the word like años on the label. So años being the Spanish word for years.
Yeah. Nowadays,
a lot of that's been taken off. But they still have the number in big, bold, forefront kind of position. And when the average consumer looks at that, they're not going to, first of all, they're not going to know what Solera is. All they're going to see is that number. And we've been conditioned to see that number as something which means it's better quality. When, as we've discussed over here now, like there's nothing to suggest. There is zero correlation between an age statement and the quality in the bottle.
So as we've just kind of spoken about, then I guess regardless, even if it is the age statement that they claim, it doesn't even mean that's going to be a good product, because as we've proven, there's so many other factors that are important to it. But
Yes.
the fact that they're putting that age statement on it, which is they're doing it in a way to mislead consumers, doesn't help their cause.
And especially using a Solera method. You know, again, I don't think Solera is bad, but I think a lot of it is ridiculously overpriced. And the thing that bugs me with that is that, you know, people are going to pay this top dollar for a product which they're expecting to be amazing, and chances are it's not going to be amazing. You know, like it's not. If you've and again, I'll use the number 30 because I used that earlier. But if you've got a 30-year-old rum and you're a whiskey drinker and you're used to drinking, say, a 30-year-old Macallan or whatever it might be, you know, chances are you're going to taste this and you're going to go, well, shit, this is nothing like, you know, the 30-year-old whiskeys I drink. And part of the reason why it's so misleading is, you know, like this whole thing of climate, the effect that it has. And we look at aging in the Caribbean, and even rums that claim to be aged at high altitude, and that's why, you know, they can do it. It's a Solera system. Even if you're aging at high altitude, you're not getting up to that age statement. You're not getting up to, you know, the number of years that you're putting as a label on, or putting on the label on your bottle. It's probably more like 6 to 10 years old. So compare it to a 6 to 10-year-old. If you're saying that higher altitude means that you're getting the same conditions as you would in somewhere like Scotland, then compare it to a 6 to 10-year-old in Scotland. If we go down to, you know, the likes of Jamaica, Barbados, and Lucia, wherever it might be, somewhere where it's kind of sea level in the Caribbean, hot tropical climate, then there is that kind of saying that 3 years of aging in Scotland is the equivalent to 1 year of aging in the Caribbean, purely because their interaction between the wood and the spirits inside the wood is accelerated by the fact that the heat forces the pores in the wood to expand, which allows more rum to soak into them. And then at nighttime, temperatures drop and the wood contracts. Okay, so you have this concertina effect, almost like this breathing effect that happens day and night, which speeds up the aging process. It also speeds up angel share as well.
Yep.
So this is, you know, something, you know, you're losing a massive amount, which, you know, is another reason why rum is amazing, because look at the value for money you get with rum. It's just phenomenal what kind of quality you can pick up in rum, which in my opinion, you don't get in any other category for the same price point.
No, I agree with that. Absolutely. I also think a really good way for people these days to have a look at a brand is when you pick up a rum bottle, have a good look at the label. Don't just look at the number. Look around the number. Does it say the word years? Does it say años? Does it say it in another language? Because regulations are getting a little bit better and newer labels are coming out that need to say it correctly. Does it say 30, as you mentioned, and then Solera underneath it? What does it actually say? Read the label, pay a little bit more attention to the small print, and hopefully that will give you more information about what's in the bottle before you try it. I think we've got another question from Richard. Oh, I like this question, actually. So what do you think removing the caramel coloring from rum, like they do with bourbon, do you think that would help in understanding for general consumers?
No, because the general consumer has no idea it's in there in the first place. I think, you know, if I talk to any of my friends over here about, you know, like aged spirits, none of them have any clue that there's something called E150A, which is added to it. In fact, most of them don't even know that there's, you know, caramel added to it. I think that what would have a bigger effect is inconsistency in color. So I think because rum, given where it's aged and the conditions it's aged in, most of the time it's aged in the tropics. And because it's aged in the tropics, those temperature fluctuations can be large every year, which means every year you have the potential for there to be noticeable differences between the color in the product. And I think if we had two, you know, products from the same distillery up on a shelf and they were slightly different color, that would probably have more of a negative effect on that brand, but also the category, than the color consistency used with E150A.
Yeah, I think that's a fair reply, actually. Not Not what I would have thought, but you're the expert, not me. And yeah, having heard you, I think
as a matter of interest, what is your take on it?
I thought, yeah, it could have been a good idea, because having inconsistencies, as long as again the consumer can see and they go, there is no E158 added to this, then they can see the inconsistencies, which then may help some of the distilleries who are actually aged in the tropics. It may help the consumer understand value, and they look and go, but I bought that bottle a month ago. Why is it different? And they might do a little bit more research. So potentially it could be good, but there are two sides to every story.
So I think that's a very fair comment, but I think that what you're looking at there depends on the available knowledge that the consumer has. So let's look at what supermarkets have tried to do. And I mean, for everybody in the UK, I don't know what it's like in the States and elsewhere at the moment, but certainly in the UK, a lot of supermarkets have taken the step to try and include the veggies or the fruits that would normally get discarded because there's a blemish on them or something like that. And it's taken that long this long for consumers to understand that just because there's a slight difference in the way this looks, it doesn't make the product that you eat bad.
Yeah,
and I think that same mentality will run through into products on a shelf as well. People tend to get scared of the unknown.
Yeah, it is very much that old adage of your first drink or your first bites with your eyes. And so, yeah, I think, that's a fair point too. Okay.
But I think for what you're talking about there, like it's, if you have maybe one day in the future when, hopefully everybody knows what it is they're eating and drinking and they take time to learn about it, then that would be a great step, But I think for building the category and getting people into the category and exploring the category more, I think for now that addition of color consistency is an important part of building it.
Yeah, I think that's fair. Maybe one day, but for right now, yeah, I think that's very good. We've got Radek again. Radek is now asking, have you heard about the term slow aged? In brackets, he put Nicaragua marketing. I think we know the brand that he's talking about.
Yeah, I mean, I think with all these things, it goes back to everything that we've covered in this chat so far. Like what does it mean? Does it result in a better quality product? And in my opinion, it's a different way of them saying they're looking to achieve a flavor profile. Other than that, it means nothing to me. The same thing as a number on a bottle, like it means nothing to me unless I know more about how they've achieved that number. So again, going back, it could be cask size, it could be, once used, new, 3 times used. It could be what kind of level of toasting do we have in there? What's the altitude? What's the climate? What's the, so the same as anything, like, unfortunately, it is a bit of a marketing term. And I don't know what they're trying to gain out of it. Obviously sales, but it's not something that I feel is going to benefit the industry in any way. And I would like it if consumers started focusing on brands that are transparent and brands that are not as focused on the whole marketing side and more just focused on getting a bloody good product into your glass.
Yeah, I think that's a very fair point. And also, I think, Radek, a very good thing that Andrew mentioned earlier was if you do manage to find that particular brand's ambassador somewhere or someone that's for it, that represents them, ask them about the term and see if they give you, see what answer they give you, and see if you're happy with the answer or not, and then make up your own decision. But always ask the question. If you're not going to ask them, we won't know. We won't have the answer because we're not on the inside. They'll have the answer for you, hopefully. Fingers crossed. We have Richard in the chat again. He says, are there any marketing points that you think brands should focus on? And is the flavor profile more important than location?
Oh, so the second part of that question is a really, really good one. I think that So I'm going to get to the second part of that question first. I think the two of them are kind of equally important. And I think they've got to kind of play off each other. I think, and here's why, is because building the category very much depends on the average person in the street showing some interest in the category. And I think we've got a better chance with playing off regions. So we can get people excited about, Jamaica, Martinique, Guadeloupe, and Barbados, etc. We can show people that there's differences in the same way that there are differences with Bordeaux, Burgundy, Languedoc, etc. So I think that if we look at the categories that have managed to really establish themselves like that, if we look at wine, wine has been, and even beer to some degree, like people know what they're going to get with German beer. They know what they're going to get with Dutch beer. They know what they're going to get with Belgian beer. So, and again, obviously there I'm talking about very much the kind of old world of beer. Like, America has probably the most exciting beer market. It's probably the most exciting beer market in the world right now. But so to say this is typical of America would be insane because it's just got a massive variety. But certainly when we look at old world beer and we look at old world wine as well, like we know what to expect from the Bordeaux region. We know what to expect from Burgundy. We know what to expect from the Loire Valley. And they've been so good at kind of building up a reputation of this is what you will get from here. And that's not to say that you can't get rums or wines, that are slightly different and tweak things. And you always get the kind of Mad Hatter winemaker over in France who wants to do something completely different. And that's awesome. But in terms of, I think in order for somebody to discover that Mad Hatter winemaker, they would have had to be, drawn to the region in the first place. And so I think, yeah, I'm leaning towards region there, but that was a really, really cool question. What is the first part of it again?
So are there any marketing points that you think brands should actually focus on telling the consumer, basically?
Yeah, I think, hopefully spreading the word of the product itself. I'm tired of bullshit marketing stories. I think rum is such a wonderful category and there's so much to explore in it and it's so diverse. Let's start spreading that information. Let's stop, talking about pirates and, altitude and stuff like that. And let's start focusing on what is essentially behind the rum, the people behind the rum. A few years ago, I was the Benelux representative for Authentic Caribbean Rum, so working with the guys at Whisper a lot. And they very kindly took me over to a few distilleries. And something that just blew my mind was the human factor behind the rum. I think a lot of people don't stop to think about the human beings that are in these distilleries working day in, day out, and how communities are literally built around these distilleries. You could argue that for a lot of the Caribbean, rum is the last sustainable form of industry they had. So obviously there are outliers there. There are places, like Trinidad as gas and all the rest of it. But for quite a few of these places, if you talk about sustainable industry, rum is what there is for some of these countries. So it would be so much, I think, cooler to focus on supporting those countries and the people that are behind the products, and getting consumers to understand that it's so much more than just something in a bottle. It's like there are actually people behind it. We do that with stuff like cheese. We do it with, we do it with wine. We do it with, Serrano ham, etc. We're very focused on the people behind it, but they've done a great job of humanizing the products that go out. And I think that with rum, some of the most special people that I've met have been in the rum industry, and I'd love to see more going out about the human beings behind it and the lives that are impacted by the sales of rum, rather than some of the bullshit that we do see.
I think that's a fair point. I think I pretty much agree with that. Hopefully that answers your question, Richard. We've got another question from Russell. He asks, what's your take on rums made from various sugarcane varietals? I've heard from one producer that different tasting rums are made, whereas someone else may say that sugarcane's all the same.
No, sugarcane isn't all the same. Can you guys see me okay? I can just see my light is getting a bit dim here.
You're getting a little dim, but we can still see you, I think. Or I can still see you.
Should I run and turn my light on quickly, or?
Go for it, go for it.
Yeah? Oh, okay, sorry. I just got a helping hand there.
Over there or something.
My girlfriend came to the rescue. So no, I mean, varietals of cane are definitely used, and I'm not going to pretend to be an expert on cane varietals, because I'm not. But certainly when you look at regions like Martinique, they are very particular about varieties of cane that they use. And as far as I remember, there's about 12 varieties that are predominantly used on Martinique. So you will get differences with these different varieties. And of course, you know, cane, like any product, sugarcane producers are developing new strains of cane all the time. So you have that with wheat, and there'll be, you know, blending varieties to make things better for, let's say, I don't know, climate change and etc. Where this is going to have the biggest impact is with agricole style rums, fresh cane juice rums.
Absolutely.
Okay? Because that's where we can really kind of get that essence of an individual, you know, varietal of cane. Once we take that cane and we reduce it down to blackstrap molasses, we've essentially stripped that characteristic out of it. Okay, so a majority of our character that's going to come across in the rum after that is down to our fermentation, our distillation. I mean, this is why, for me, wild fermentation in rum is so incredible. Mm-hmm. And I think even, you know, if you look at the likes of Worthy Park, so when it comes to their fermentation, they've got a generic yeast strain, they've got a self-propagated yeast strain, and of course they've got wild fermentation as well. Hamden Estate, purely wild fermentation. And even a lot of the distilleries where they do have either a generic strain or a self-propagated strain, it's open fermentation tanks. So they're getting a wild influence anyway. And that for me is where we start to get a lot of the characteristic and molasses-based rums, not from the single varietals of cane that are being used, because again, we've stripped that character out in the sugar kind of refining process, and we're left with the molasses. So I hope this answers your question okay, but does single variety make a difference? Yeah, absolutely it does, but not when it comes to molasses-based rums.
Yeah, I think the one thing I can add to that is there's a couple of brands that I know of and actually have varietals where they have, for example, I was in a seminar with Rum Clement last week, and the brand ambassador there had two varietals. One was their normal 40% ABV Blanc, and then they had their Can Bleu, which is literally a varietal which is only using blue sugarcane. So you could literally taste the difference having those two side by side. So I would urge you to kind of find a brand like that, or the other one I know of is La Favorite from Martinique as well.
Yeah, as far as I'm aware, Trois Hivers do a similar thing as well.
They do as well.
So, and forgive my French pronunciation, South Africans are not blessed at pronouncing French words. But yeah, absolutely. I think whenever you look at, you know, fresh cane producers, have a look at what they're doing, and quite often they're quite informative on their websites as well. Like I think the guys from Clement have a bit of info on their website regarding the cane varieties and etc. So have a look at their websites, and if there is no info there, then again reach out to the guys. You know, let them know that there is this demand for that type of information, and then hopefully they'll share more of it.
Yeah, absolutely. All of those brands should be around, and you should be able to search for them or ask the people that you know, do they know the people from there? But I would actively encourage you to, which actually does help to what we've been talking about earlier with going back to the roots of a rum, going back to the underaged distillate, trying those so you can actually be able to taste the difference. And you can actually try them when you go to Martinique. And Radek's just added into the chat, Guadeloupe also has some, obviously being Sister Island. It's got Caracara, which has the blue cane. Biel's got the grey cane. Montebello has the black cane. So there's so many different cane varietals. I think you just need to look at the unaged cane juice versions or the agrohols, not the molasses-based, as Andrew mentioned.
Yeah.
Great. Guys, I think that kind of wraps us up today. Andrew, any final words?
Share the rum love. Get out there. I mean, what else is there to say? No, obviously, to everyone who's taken the time out of their day to be a part of this, really, really appreciate it. And thank you for listening to me for as long as you have. And thank you, obviously, to the guys from RumCask as well for inviting me on as well. It's been really cool to sit and chat. If anybody wants to reach out to me with any questions they might have about William George or about anything we've spoken about today, then by all means do look me up. My email address is andrew@williamgeorgerum.com. Hit me up, or otherwise on social media, and I'll be happy to take the chat further.
Great, thank you. I'd just like to say thank you so much, Andrew. Your knowledge and the talk today has been very informative. I've learned a lot myself, and I'm hoping that a lot of people have come and they've really enjoyed stuff. Guys, we will be back with another broadcast maybe in a couple of weeks. In the meantime, please keep an eye out for Andrew. Keep an eye out for William George in case you find any. Keep an eye out for us as well, RumCask. But otherwise, thank you very much. Really appreciate your time, and we'll hopefully see you soon.
Cheers, guys. All the best.